Cops beat the black woman's daughter into a coma. She took down the entire department. Blood was everywhere. On the pavement, on her sneakers, in her curls. Brielle Carter, only 16, lay crumpled in the alley behind Millwood High, her breath shallow, her lips whispering something no one could hear. Her face was bruised, her arm bent at an unnatural angle. The two officers who had pinned her moments ago were now frozen in place, batons still slick with her blood, as the crowd that had once been silent began to scream. Phones were out. Recording. "What the hell is wrong with y'all?" someone shouted, but the girl didn't move. Not even a twitch. A teacher pushed through the crowd. Mr. Patel, a quiet man who'd taught Brielle physics last semester, knelt down and checked her pulse. "She's not responsive," he murmured. "Call 911, now." Across town, Camille Carter's phone rang once, then again. She was sitting in her small law office above a bookstore in East Baltimore. It wasn't flashy, but it was hers. She hadn't touched a courtroom in years. Not since what happened in Afghanistan, not since she buried the past and rebuilt a quiet life for her and her daughter. But now, as the calls kept coming, her gut told her this was no accident. "Miss Carter," said the voice on the other end, tight with urgency, "your daughter's been taken to Mercy General. It's serious." The next sound was the office door slamming behind her. Camille didn't cry when she saw Brielle in the ICU. She didn't tremble when the nurse whispered, "Closed head trauma. Possible brain swelling. She's in a medically induced coma for now." She just nodded. Her eyes never left her child. Her daughter's skin was pale against the white sheets, her left eye swollen shut. A small machine beeped steadily near her head, keeping time like a cold reminder of what had been done. A female officer stood outside the room. Camille approached her calmly. "Were you one of them?" The woman flinched. "I'm just on watch." "I didn't ask what you're doing now," Camille said, her voice level. "I asked if you put your hands on my child." The officer looked away. Camille didn't say another word, but inside her something cracked open, something she had worked hard for 8 years to bury. That night, Camille pulled the duffel bag from the back of her closet. Her old flight suit still smelled like sand and fuel. She ran her hand over the navy patch, then the other patch, an eagle clutching arrows, and beneath it her call sign, Ghost. Not many people in Baltimore knew Camille Carter used to be a fighter pilot. Fewer knew the missions she flew for the Pentagon. She was a tactician, a leader, a problem solver under fire. And now her daughter was in a coma because 2 overzealous cops thought a black teen looked suspicious near a high school. They picked the wrong mother. The next morning, Camille walked into the precinct unannounced. Her heels clicked on the linoleum floor like gunfire. A young officer stood up behind the reception desk. "Ma'am, this area is restricted." "Call your captain," she said. "Tell him Camille Carter is here. He'll know the name." The officer hesitated, then picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, Captain Drew Hastings came down from his office, face stiff, jaw clenched. "Well, well," he said. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again." "You shouldn't have to," she said flatly. "But your men put my daughter in the ICU yesterday." He swallowed hard. "Camille, if this is a legal matter—" "I'm not here as an attorney. I'm here as a mother," she said. "And this isn't a legal matter, not yet. But it will be if I don't get answers. We're still collecting body cam footage." "I've already seen it," she interrupted. Hastings blinked. "How?" She didn't answer. "Listen," he said. "This doesn't need to get messy." "Too late," she said, her tone ice cold. "You have 48 hours. I want the names of every officer who laid a finger on my daughter. I want their histories. I want internal complaints. And I want to know why she was even stopped." "And if we don't?" Camille leaned in slightly, just enough for her voice to drop. Then I'll show you what a woman with clearance, a war record, and nothing left to lose looks like. That night, Camille drove to a building most civilians would mistake for an old warehouse. Inside, it was anything but. "Carter," said a familiar voice. "No way. You're out." "Not anymore," she said. It was Marcus Hale, a former military intelligence analyst now working with a private contractor. Camille handed him a file. "I need everything you can get me on these badge numbers," quietly. He skimmed the pages and whistled. "This one's been suspended twice. This one was involved in a shooting last year. Internal Affairs buried both." "Dig deeper," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You planning to take them to court?" "No," she said. "I'm planning to take them apart." By the time morning came, the entire department had felt the ripple. Camille's face was still calm, but behind her a digital trail was being built. Old misconduct reports, racial profiling stats, whistleblower accounts no one had paid attention to before. And Camille, she wasn't stopping, because somewhere beneath those hospital sheets was her little girl. And until Brielle could open her eyes again, Camille would be hers, her voice, her weapon, her vengeance, and the city was about to feel it. Camille stood at the kitchen sink, staring blankly out the window as the morning light filtered through the blinds. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. Her body operated on memory now. Reflex, discipline, rage. On the counter lay a manila folder. Inside, photocopies of every page Marcus had pulled from the department's internal systems overnight. It was worse than she'd expected. Officer Brent Talbot, Officer Raymond Kinney. The names were seared into her mind now. Both had multiple complaints against them, use of excessive force, racial profiling, harassment, all closed with a slap on the wrist, if anything. Most never even reached a supervisor's desk, and now they had put her daughter into a coma. The papers trembled slightly in her hands, but not from fear, from restraint. Camille had faced enemy fire. She'd been the only woman in flight briefings with 3-star generals. But this quiet rot beneath the surface of her own city was more dangerous than anything she'd ever flown into. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Agent Dana McAllister," the voice answered. "It's Camille," she said. "I need to see you." The field office for the Department of Justice sat tucked behind an old post office in South Baltimore. Easy to miss unless you knew what to look for. Camille did. Inside, Dana McAllister looked up from a mountain of paperwork. Her eyes lit up with a mix of warmth and dread. "Tell me this isn't about what I think it is." Camille dropped the folder on her desk. "It's worse." Dana flipped through the pages quickly, her brow furrowed, then raised, then dropped again. "Jesus, Talbot, that guy's still on the street? I flagged him 5 years ago." "And you buried it?" "I buried nothing," Dana snapped. "My report got kicked back by the DA's office, said it lacked substantial evidence. You know how this game works." Camille folded her arms. "You're saying I need to play it better." "No, I'm saying you're playing with fire." "I'm fine with fire." Dana exhaled and sat back. "What do you want from me?" "Access, intel, anything that helps me hold them accountable." Dana hesitated. "You know, if I help you with this off-record, it could end both our careers." "You owe me," Camille said quietly. Dana's eyes flicked up. "That's low." Camille didn't flinch. So was beating a kid into a coma. Back at the hospital, Camille stood outside Brielle's room and watched the monitors beep and flash their sterile rhythm. Nurses came and went. Dr. Lehner gave updates that felt increasingly hollow. "No change, still stable. We're monitoring closely." But stable wasn't enough. Camille needed a crack, a witness, a mistake. And then it came. A nurse pulled her aside, a young black woman named Janessa, nervous, eyes darting down the hallway before she spoke. "I shouldn't say anything," she whispered, "but I was at the ER intake that night. I saw the officers who brought her in." Camille's pulse kicked up. "They didn't treat her like a victim," Janessa said. "They were laughing. One of them actually said, 'She's lucky we didn't finish the job.'" Camille's hand clenched. "You'd testify?" Janessa shook her head. "I can't. Not unless I have protection. My job's already on the line just for talking to you." Camille handed her a card. "Call this number. Use my name. Tell them you're a whistleblower under Title VII. You'll be safe. I'll make sure of it." Later that night, Camille drove to her old contacts bar, the Brass Lantern. It was a cover. Always had been. She sat at the back booth waiting. 10 minutes in, a stocky man in a faded army jacket slid in across from her. Otis Walker, former military, now a security consultant for people with problems too big for the police. "You're back in it," he said without even a greeting. "I never really left," Camille replied. He smirked. "What do you need?" "A plan," she said. "I'm going to take down an entire department." He blinked, then laughed. "You serious?" "I'm beyond serious." Otis leaned forward. "Then let me tell you how it works now. You don't just need proof. You need a war chest, public support, leverage. I've got connections, names, documents. You'll need more than that. You need something they can't spin in a press release." Camille nodded slowly. "Then we go public," she said. Otis chuckled. "There's the Camille I remember. Ghost isn't dead after all." The next morning, Camille uploaded a video to a private server. In it, she sat in front of a simple black backdrop. No logo, no makeup, just truth. "My name is Camille Carter," she said into the camera. "I am a former combat pilot, a veteran of 3 classified operations, and a proud mother. 1 week ago, my daughter Brielle was assaulted by 2 police officers outside her school. She is now in a coma." She held up a photo, Brielle's 8th grade graduation. "She is 16 years old. She plays cello. She volunteers at the food bank. She wanted to be a doctor." Camille's voice broke slightly. "And now, because of 2 men who treated her like a threat instead of a child, I may never hear her voice again." She paused. "But I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here for justice, and I will not stop until it is done." She clicked stop. Otis sent it out. 10 hours later, the video had 1 million views. By dawn, the whole country would know her name. And more importantly, they'd know what the Baltimore PD had done. Camille Carter wasn't just a mother. She was a storm, and the system had no idea what it had just awakened. The city was no longer quiet. Camille Carter's face was everywhere, on news tickers, social media feeds, cable talk shows. The video had lit a match under a powder keg of long-simmering outrage. Baltimore wasn't just watching. America was. In the police department's downtown headquarters, Captain Raymond Kinney paced the hallway outside the conference room, fists clenched and shirt collar damp with sweat. Inside, the chief, 2 lawyers, and a press relations team tried to script a response. "They're painting us like monsters," Kinney muttered, staring at the flat screen in the lobby playing CNN. Camille's face filled the frame. The anchor's voice was sharp. "A decorated war veteran, a mother, and now a symbol for accountability in policing." Officer Brent Talbot leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "This is getting out of control," he said. Kinney looked at him. "You should have kept your mouth shut that night." Talbot's jaw tightened. "You should have stopped me." Neither said it, but both knew. They were exposed now. Across town, Camille sat at a round table with Dana McAllister and Otis Walker. The coffee shop was loud, but their corner stayed quiet. Camille flipped through a thick file Otis had prepared. Photos, case summaries, news clippings. Every civil suit settled with hush money, Otis said. Same pattern, same names. Talbot and Kinney keep showing up like mold. Dana nodded grimly. They're protected. There's a network above them. Judges, DAs, internal affairs. You won't break this with just public sympathy. Camille didn't blink. Then we expose the whole network. Dana looked hesitant. That's dangerous, Camille. I'm not afraid of danger. Otis leaned forward. You will be once you see what's next. He pulled out a flash drive and inserted it into Camille's tablet. A video popped up. Body cam footage, unreleased, sealed, leaked by someone within the department, a favor Otis had called in. Camille hit play. The footage was raw, blurry at first, but then it sharpened. There was Brielle, standing outside her school gates, books in hand, wearing her varsity jacket. Talbot's voice crackled through the mic. She's resisting. Brielle wasn't. She was backing away, hands in plain sight. Then the strike came, a baton. The screen jolted with motion, screams, and finally the sickening thud of Brielle's head against concrete. Camille's hands shook. Dana closed her eyes. Otis said nothing. He didn't need to. Camille stood. Leak it, she whispered. Dana opened her mouth. Camille, I said leak it. The footage went viral in under 30 minutes. Within hours, #JusticeForBrielle was trending nationwide. Protesters gathered in front of the police department. Local journalists camped out at Camille's doorstep. Civil rights attorneys reached out, offering pro bono support. But Camille didn't care about fame. She wanted the system gutted. That night, an emergency city council meeting was called. The mayor, under pressure, promised an independent review. But Camille knew the playbook. Delays, stalling, legalese. So she upped the stakes. She marched into the press conference with Otis at her side, carrying a second folder. This one marked confidential. She walked straight to the podium. My name is Camille Carter, she began. I appreciate the mayor's sudden interest in justice, but let me be clear. My daughter is not a political inconvenience. She held up the folder. This contains evidence that these two officers were not only protected, but encouraged. It includes emails, internal memos, and signed non-disclosure agreements from previous victims who were silenced. Gasps rippled through the room. Unless this department takes immediate action, full termination, arrests, and a federal investigation, I will release every page to the public and to the press. The room erupted. The mayor's face turned pale. The police chief stammered for a response. Camille stepped back from the podium and whispered to Otis, Get ready, they won't go quietly. That night, someone broke into Camille's home. They didn't make it far. A steel bar wedged behind the door. Motion sensors, security cameras. Camille sat in the shadows, Glock in hand, watching the screen as a masked figure stumbled into her foyer and got tackled instantly by Otis, who'd been waiting in the living room. They unmasked him. Officer Talbot. He was disoriented, bleeding from the lip, eyes wild. You broke into a federal officer's home, Otis growled. You think this scares me? Talbot spat. You think any of this matters? You're a has-been. You're nothing without a badge. Camille knelt beside him. I don't need a badge to take down men like you, she said. I just need the truth. She nodded to Otis. Call Dana. Let's make this official. By morning, Talbot was in custody. The video of his arrest leaked. Camille didn't stop. She held another press briefing, standing on the courthouse steps, this time with Brielle's empty shoes beside her on a small white stool. My daughter is still unconscious, she said, but she is not voiceless. Every person who shared our story is her voice now. Every protester, every tweet, every lawyer who stepped up, you are her chorus. She looked directly into the camera. Don't let them rewrite the story. We are not done. The crowd applauded, but Camille didn't smile. She turned and walked away, fire in her chest. Because deep down she knew this was still just the beginning. The corruption ran deeper. The department wasn't going to surrender easily, and she was ready to burn it all down to get justice. The room fell silent the moment the door opened. Camille stepped into the federal courtroom in a navy pantsuit, hair pulled back in a tight bun, expression unreadable. Every eye followed her as she walked past the rows of reporters, community activists, and a growing number of off-duty officers who had come to observe. Dana McAllister was already seated at the plaintiff's table, papers organized, laptop open, her sharp eyes scanning every expression in the room. Camille sat beside her, nodding once without a word. "You ready for this?" Dana whispered. Camille replied without looking at her. "I was born for it." The bailiff called the courtroom to order. The judge, an older black woman named Celeste Harmon, took her seat. Camille had done her research. Judge Harmon had a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, but she also had a long history in civil rights litigation before taking the bench. "I hope that works in our favor," Dinah had said. Now, as the judge's gavel rang out, it was time to find out. On the other side of the courtroom sat Captain Raymond Kinney and his attorney, a smug man in a gray three-piece suit named Evan Carlisle. Next to him, Officer Brent Talbot sat with a thin bruise across his jaw, courtesy of his failed break-in attempt. The news hadn't reported it, but Dana had made sure the judge was informed off-record. Camille stared at them, her expression steady. Talbot didn't meet her eyes. Carlisle opened with a statement dripping with performative regret. "This incident is tragic," he said, "but we must remember, policing is not a perfect science. Officers are trained to make split-second decisions." Dana stood. "Objection, Your Honor. We are here to present evidence, not to entertain justifications." Judge Harmon waved her hand. "Sustained. Mr. Carlisle, stick to the facts." Carlisle tried to backpedal, but the damage was done. Then it was Dana's turn. She rose slowly, her voice calm but deliberate. "Your Honor, we intend to prove not only that excessive force was used against Brielle Carter, a 17-year-old honor student, but that it was part of a pattern of systemic abuse protected and encouraged by the Baltimore Police Department." She clicked a remote. A screen behind her lit up. Slide after slide showed other cases, other black and brown victims, civil settlements, sealed reports, suppressed footage, all of it connected by the same thread, Kinney and Talbot. Camille watched Kinney's jaw tighten. "Your Honor," Dana said, "we have a witness prepared to testify today, Officer Harold Reese, who served under Captain Kinney until last year. He has chosen to break his NDA and speak on what really goes on inside that department." There was a murmur across the courtroom. Camille turned as the door opened again, and in walked Officer Reese. Gray at the temples, shoulders squared with quiet guilt, he looked directly at Camille as he took the stand. "I was a coward," he said into the mic, "but no more." He detailed the quota systems, the silent green lighting of force against black youth, the racial slurs used in briefing rooms, and most damning of all, an email he had saved, signed by Kinney himself, instructing officers to remind troublemakers who's in charge. Camille's breath caught. The courtroom exploded in whispers. Carlisle tried to object, but it was useless now. Judge Harmon allowed the document into the record. "You've just opened the floodgates," Dana whispered to Camille. Camille's reply was cold. Good. During the recess, Camille stepped outside for air. Protesters lined the steps. Some held signs, some lit candles. Others just stood there holding photos of loved ones who'd never gotten justice. A young woman approached her, tears in her eyes. "My brother died in lockup," she said quietly. "They said it was suicide, but he had bruises everywhere. No one would listen." Camille held her hand. "I hear you now." From across the street, a dark SUV watched them. Inside, Lieutenant Carl Owens, Kinney's longtime fixer, lifted his phone. "She's making too much noise," he muttered. "Do you want me to handle it?" asked the man next to him. Owens gave a sharp look. "Not yet, but make sure she knows she's being watched." That night, Camille returned home to find her mailbox pried open. A manila envelope sat inside. No return address. Inside, a single photo of her and Brielle. Outside the hospital, circled in red ink. On the back, the words, "Back off, or next time we finish what we started." Camille stared at it for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop. She wrote a short email to Dana, Otis, and Judge Harmon. Subject line, "We go public, all of it." Attached, every sealed document, every internal email, every statement Officer Reese had just verified under oath. She clicked send. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. "This is Camille Carter," she said. "I want an interview, national broadcast, no edits. I'll talk about everything." The producer on the other end of the line stammered in excitement. Camille didn't wait. She hung up, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark beside Brielle's empty bed. She held her daughter's hand. "I'm not stopping," she whispered. "You hear me, baby? I'm not stopping until every last one of them falls." The morning Camille Carter went live on national television, Baltimore stopped. The interview had been heavily promoted, "The Mother Who Won't Be Silenced," and aired across every major network. But no one was prepared for what she actually said. Dressed in a simple black dress, Camille sat upright under studio lights, hands folded in her lap. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate. "They didn't just hurt my daughter," she said, eyes locked with the camera. "They've been hurting all of us, quietly, with permission. But I'm not quiet anymore." She released footage no one had seen before. Body cam videos, audio clips of officers mocking victims, and a partial recording from the night of Brielle's assault, recorded accidentally by a nearby smart doorbell. In the clip, Talbot's voice could be heard yelling, "Pin her down, little brat thinks she's above the law." The reaction was instant. Phones rang, protests erupted again. Camille's inbox overflowed with messages, some of support, some of threats. But it wasn't until an anonymous source leaked the internal memos Camille had sent to the media that the department truly began to crumble. The memos showed exactly what Officer Reese had claimed. Targeted tactics in black neighborhoods, inflated charges, pressure to clean the streets before quarterly reviews. Camille's name was flagged internally. So was Brielle's school. "Retaliation protocols," one memo said. People were furious. Yet, as the walls closed in around the department, Camille's real plan was just beginning. Camille met with Otis Clark in the back of a Jamaican cafe in East Baltimore, one she knew didn't have cameras or prying ears. Otis was no longer just an ex-detective. After Camille's interview, he'd gone viral for defending her on a late-night panel, exposing things even he hadn't dared to say until now. "You lit a fire," he said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Surveillance logs from inside the department's internal affairs archive. Someone's been watching you for months." Camille opened the source. There were photos of her home, of her at the hospital, even one of her speaking with Officer Reese, dated a week before he testified. They knew he was flipping, Camille said, voice barely above a whisper. Otis nodded grimly. I think they planned to take him out if he didn't stay quiet. Camille's eyes narrowed. Then we move faster. She handed Otis a list. I want to subpoena everyone on this, from the assistant chief down to the desk clerks. If they've seen something, I want it on record. Otis raised an eyebrow. You're trying to shake the whole tree. No, Camille said. I'm trying to cut it down. Meanwhile, Captain Kinney held an emergency meeting at a private warehouse owned by a former officer turned contractor. Brent Talbot stood nearby, clearly rattled. Camille Carter is out of control, Kinney barked, slamming his fist on the table. She's going after our pensions, our careers, our families. She's also not wrong, muttered an older officer in the back. Kinney turned to him slowly. You want to end up like Reese? Silence. Lieutenant Owens leaned in. We need to make a move, Ray. Something clean. Discredit her before she drags this into federal court. Talbot finally spoke. What if we leak her file? The sealed one, the time she sued the DA's office, maybe even the fact that she changed her name. Kinney paused. She changed her name? Owens nodded. Years ago. After a case she was involved in went sideways. You bury that deep, you start over. Until someone starts digging. Kinney smirked. Then let's dig. That night, Camille received an email from a burner account. Subject: You forgot we know who you are. Attached was a PDF file with her old name, Camilla Easton. Under it, sealed court records. Misconduct allegations, not against her, but from a case where she had been the prosecutor, and the police evidence had mysteriously gone missing. A drug conviction had been overturned and her reputation had nearly crumbled. The case had ruined her first marriage and prompted her to relocate, take a sabbatical, and eventually change her name. It was her lowest moment. But it wasn't a secret. Not to her. Camille stared at the screen for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Dana. We need to get ahead of it, she said. Dana agreed. You sure? Camille smiled bitterly. I've got nothing left to lose. The next morning, Camille called for a press conference. The room was packed. Cameras clicked, live streams rolled. She walked to the podium and faced the microphones. Some of you are about to receive documents attempting to discredit me, she began. Yes, I changed my name. Yes, I made mistakes, but none of that changes what they did to my daughter. She paused. And if the price of exposing the truth is dragging my own past into the light, then so be it. I'll carry that weight. What I won't carry, what none of us should carry, is silence. Applause erupted. Even some reporters wiped away tears. In the back, a woman in a wheelchair wearing a hospital gown watched through a video call. It was Brielle. The girl had opened her eyes. Back inside the warehouse, Kinney threw the remote across the room. She flipped it on us, he screamed. How the hell did she flip it? Owens looked uneasy. Because she's not afraid to lose, and that makes her dangerous. Talbot whispered, What do we do now? Kinney stared at the TV screen. We stopped playing defense. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Activate everything. Burn the files. Get rid of the tapes. And make sure Camille Carter disappears from the headlines permanently. But outside that warehouse, parked down the street, was a white van. Inside, Otis Clark listened through a live tap. He hit record. Camille wasn't done yet, and neither was Justice. The warehouse raid hit the evening news like a thunderclap. Flashing red and blue lights danced across the screen as viewers across the country watched live footage of federal agents storming a decaying industrial building on the edge of Baltimore's Port District. Inside, agents recovered dozens of black trash bags filled with shredded documents, incinerated hard drives, and, most chilling, personal files on multiple community leaders, journalists, and even Camille Carter's own legal team. The raid came just 12 hours after Otis Clark delivered the secret recording of Kinney's order to a federal prosecutor. The case had crossed a line now. It wasn't just a local scandal, it was a national emergency. Inside her modest home, Camille stood frozen, watching the news beside Dana. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed a tissue to her lips, not from fear, but from restrained rage and disbelief. "They were tracking journalists," Camille whispered. Dinah nodded solemnly. "Not just tracking, planning coordinated leaks, framing activists." Otis's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "The FBI's all over it now. They've got subpoenas flying in every direction, and Kinney's trying to cover his tracks hard." Camille took a breath. "That's fine. Let him run. The walls are closing in." Then Otis added something that made both women go still. "There's one more thing. I didn't want to say it till I was sure." "Go on," Camille said. "They had someone inside the hospital, someone falsifying Brielle's records." Silence fell like a brick. Camille clenched her fists. "Why?" Otis exhaled. "To make it look like the coma wasn't caused by blunt force trauma. To blame it on an undiagnosed seizure disorder. They wanted to weaken your case." Camille's voice cracked. "They tried to erase the evidence from my daughter's body." Her eyes filled, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. "They want war?" she said. "Then let's give them one." Later that night, Camille arrived at the University of Maryland Medical Center with 2 federal agents and a newly assigned medical examiner. She had obtained an emergency injunction to secure Brielle's original medical data before anything else could be altered. The head nurse was cooperative, if nervous. "We've had unusual access requests these past few weeks," she admitted, "but we were told they came from internal reviews." The forensic expert reviewed Brielle's scans, blood reports, and notes. His conclusion was blunt. "There's clear evidence of cranial trauma consistent with repeated blunt force impact," he said. "This child didn't fall. She was beaten. Hard." Camille stood there, shaking. Dana stepped in. "This proves they tried to erase the crime." But Camille was already thinking further. "They didn't just try," she said. "They might have done it before to other kids." That night, Camille released a new press statement. But this time, it wasn't a speech. It was an open call to every mother whose child had been mistreated or falsely accused by the department, to every student harassed, every man brutalized, every family torn apart. It was a fire alarm for justice. Within 24 hours, her email received over 700 testimonials. A mother in Cherry Hill whose autistic son was dragged out of school. A grandmother whose grandson was framed for gun possession. A pastor whose church was raided without a warrant. Each voice added fuel to the storm. Meanwhile, inside a private office in Annapolis, Kinney stared at an arrest warrant with his name on it. His phone buzzed. It was Talbot. "She's mobilizing people now," Talbot said. "She's not just fighting for her daughter anymore." Kinney scoffed. "That woman is turning grief into a revolution." "And we're losing control," Talbot muttered. "There's talk the governor might step in." Kinney stood abruptly, slamming the door shut. "No one's stepping in. Not until I say so." But then a voice behind him said coldly, "That's no longer your call." He turned to see a tall, clean-cut man in a Navy suit, U.S. Marshal Eric Laird. "You're being relieved of duty," Laird said, showing his badge. "Effective immediately." "What is this?" Kinney barked. It's the end of the road, Laird replied. We have 3 witnesses, 2 recordings, and a signed affidavit tying you to suppression of evidence and obstruction of justice. Kinney's face paled, but the marshal wasn't done. And one more thing, he said, pulling out a phone. Camille Carter sends her regards. He hit play. It was the voice of Kinney on the warehouse tap. Make sure Camille Carter disappears from the headlines, permanently. Kinney lunged for the phone, but 2 agents grabbed him. He screamed curses as he was dragged away. Back in her living room, Camille sat alone, watching the footage of Kinney's arrest on her laptop. For a moment, she allowed herself a small smile. Then she looked at the folder in front of her, one containing every single story from the victims who had reached out. This isn't over, she said softly. Dana entered the room with tea. You could stop now. You've already done more than most people ever dream of. Camille shook her head. I'm not here to dream. I'm here to rebuild. Then she opened a new document on her laptop. Baltimore Civil Rights Accountability Coalition, Founding Charter. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then she began to type. Camille Carter stepped onto the stage of the Baltimore Civic Auditorium to thunderous applause. The room, filled with nearly 1,000 community members, journalists, activists, and victims, vibrated with a sense of momentum that had been absent for far too long in the city. This wasn't just a town hall, it was a reckoning. Behind her, projected on a 30-foot screen, were the names and faces of those wronged by the BPD. Students expelled without cause, men assaulted in alleyways, single mothers jailed for resisting illegal searches. And at the center of them all was a photograph of Brielle, eyes closed, breathing through tubes, but surrounded by flowers and drawings from supporters around the country. Camille approached the mic, but before speaking, she looked over her shoulder at her daughter's image and took a deep breath. I didn't plan to become a symbol, she began, her voice steady. And I sure didn't plan to become your enemy, according to the department. There was a wave of muted laughter, but when my daughter was nearly killed for walking while black, something broke in me, and then something bigger woke up. Applause. What they did to Brielle, what they tried to hide, wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, and now the whole country sees it. More applause, louder this time. But tonight isn't about just one case. It's about every cover-up, every abuse swept under the rug, every voice ignored. She paused. And I promise you, this system is going to change. The crowd rose to their feet. 2 hours later, in a dimly lit boardroom at the heart of the Baltimore Police Department, Interim Commissioner Russell Maynard slammed a stack of papers onto the table. We've got over a dozen officers on administrative leave, a federal audit breathing down our necks, and a literal parade of victims marching through City Hall demanding reform, he said, glaring around the room. And you want to know the worst part? He held up a glossy flyer featuring Camille's face beside the bold words, Camille Carter for City Council. Justice is just the start. She's running, Maynard muttered. Captain Irene Talbot scoffed. Good. Let her play politics. It gets her out of our hair. But Lieutenant Drew Folsom shook his head. You don't get it, Irene. She's not playing. She's winning. There was a long silence before Maynard spoke again. She's got the people. She's got the fez. She's got the press. He turned slowly to Talbot. What do we have? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. They had nothing left. Meanwhile, in her daughter's hospital room, Camille sat by Brielle's side, gently braiding her hair while reading aloud the messages from the public. This one's from a young girl in Chicago. She says, When I grow up, I want to be like Brielle's mom, strong and fearless. Brielle's eyelids fluttered. Camille froze, heart in her throat. Then, slowly, Brielle's fingers twitched. The heart monitor beeped faster. Camille gasped and leaned in. "Brielle, baby, can you hear me?" A soft moan escaped Brielle's lips. Her eyes opened, blurry, unfocused, but unmistakably alive. Camille sobbed, pressing her daughter's hand to her lips. Outside the room, Dana Carter saw the nurses rush in. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed, and whispered, "She made it." That night, Camille held a press conference, not to celebrate, but to escalate. With her daughter stable and awake, she now had the emotional strength and the political will to go for the throat. "I'm calling for the full dismantling and restructuring of the Baltimore Police Department," Camille declared. "With civilian oversight, new leadership, and mandatory federal review." Reporters erupted in questions. One shouted, "Camille, some critics say you're going too far. What do you say to them?" She turned, unshaken. "I say we haven't gone far enough." She walked off stage, leaving the room in stunned silence. In Washington, D.C., a Justice Department official named Raymond Knoll reviewed Camille's petition. "We've got something real here," he told his aide. "Not just a viral moment, a movement." The aide raised an eyebrow. "Are we prepared to act on it?" Knoll nodded slowly. "It's time. Let's open a formal investigation." 2 days later, Camille received an envelope with the Department of Justice seal. Inside was a single line. "You were right, we're coming." Camille looked out her window at the city below. It was bruised, tired, divided. 2 hours later, in a dimly lit boardroom at the heart of the Baltimore Police Department, Interim Commissioner Russell Maynard slammed a stack of papers onto the table. "We've got over a dozen officers on administrative leave, a federal audit breathing down our necks, and a literal parade of victims marching through City Hall demanding reform," he said, glaring around the room. "And you want to know the worst part?" He held up a glossy flyer featuring Camille's face beside the bold words, "Camille Carter for City Council. Justice is just the start." "She's running," Maynard muttered. Captain Irene Talbot scoffed. "Good. Let her play politics. It gets her out of our hair." But Lieutenant Drew Folsom shook his head. "You don't get it, Irene. She's not playing. She's winning." There was a long silence before Maynard spoke again. "She's got the people. She's got the feds. She's got the press." He turned slowly to Talbot. "What do we have?" No one answered because they all knew the truth. They had nothing left. Meanwhile, in her daughter's hospital room, Camille sat by Brielle's side, gently braiding her hair while reading aloud the messages from the public. This one's from a young girl in Chicago. She says, "When I grow up, I want to be like Brielle's mom, strong and fearless." Brielle's eyelids fluttered. Camille froze, heart in her throat. Then, slowly, Brielle's fingers twitched. The heart monitor beeped faster. Camille gasped and leaned in. "Brielle, baby, can you hear me?" A soft moan escaped Brielle's lips. Her eyes opened, blurry, unfocused, but unmistakably alive. Camille sobbed, pressing her daughter's hand to her lips. Outside the room, Dana Carter saw the nurses rush in. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed, and whispered, "She made it." That night, Camille held a press conference, not to celebrate, but to escalate. With her daughter stable and awake, she now had the emotional strength and the political will to go for the throat. "I'm calling for the full dismantling and restructuring of the Baltimore Police Department," Camille declared. "With civilian oversight, new leadership, and mandatory federal review." Reporters erupted in questions. One shouted, "Camille, some critics say you're going too far. What do you say to them?" She turned, unshaken. "I say we haven't gone far enough." She walked off stage, leaving the room in stunned silence. In Washington, D.C., A Justice Department official named Raymond Knoll reviewed Camille's petition. "We've got something real here," he told his aide. "Not just a viral moment, a movement." The aide raised an eyebrow. "Are we prepared to act on it?" Knoll nodded slowly. "It's time. Let's open a formal investigation." 2 days later, Camille received an envelope with the Department of Justice seal. Inside was a single line. "You were right. We're coming." Camille looked out her window at the city below. It was bruised, tired, divided. But now, for the first time in years, it was also awake. And the woman who had been underestimated, ignored, and nearly broken was the one lighting the fuse. The courtroom was packed wall to wall. Reporters lined the back row, pens poised. Protesters stood just outside, chanting Camille's name, their signs held high. "Justice for Brielle. End police terror. We stand with Camille." Inside, it was silent. The judge looked stern. The federal prosecutors were expressionless. Across the aisle, a line of officers, including Captain Irene Talbot and Lieutenant Drew Folsom, sat in full uniform, flanked by their lawyers. They looked like fallen statues, rigid, cold, hollow. Camille took the stand, not as a grieving mother, not as a political candidate, but as a witness to everything. "I was told by Chief Myers himself that the footage from my daughter's beating no longer existed," Camille began, voice steady. "But what he didn't know was that I already had a copy, and I was just waiting for him to lie about it, on record." There was a gasp across the courtroom. She handed a flash drive to the bailiff. "This contains not only the full footage from the school's security cameras, but an internal email thread between officers and command staff discussing how to suppress and distort what happened." The screen behind the judge lit up. The room watched in frozen horror as Brielle, slender, defenseless, was thrown to the ground, her head striking the hallway corner. Talbot's voice could be heard. "Make sure that camera's off. If she twitches, charge her with resisting." Then the screen went black. The judge stared for a long moment. "Counselor," he said to the defense, "do you still wish to argue this was protocol?" No answer. The silence was their answer. Later that afternoon, Camille stood on the courthouse steps. Her voice cut through the city air like a battle cry. "This is not just about my daughter," she told the crowd. "This is about every family who was too afraid to speak, every parent who buried a child without justice, every person who was told to shut up, move along, be quiet." A reporter asked, "Camille, now that the officers are indicted, what's next?" She didn't hesitate. "We rebuild." 1 month later, the Baltimore Police Department was placed under federal supervision. Over 24 officers were either fired or criminally charged. Body cam requirements became law statewide, and a new civilian review board, led by Camille herself, was formed to oversee internal conduct with full subpoena power. The ripple went further. In D.C., a bill titled the Brielle Justice Act was introduced to Congress, mandating independent investigations in all cases of police brutality involving minors. Camille, invited to speak on the House floor, ended her speech with a quiet power. "You don't have to be rich, powerful, or famous to demand justice. You just have to be loud enough that the system can't ignore you." That evening, in a quiet home lit by the soft glow of recovery, Brielle sat up in bed for the first time, surrounded by balloons and cards from supporters all over the country. Camille entered with 2 mugs of tea and handed one to her daughter. "You look stronger today," she said softly. Brielle smiled weakly. "I feel like I've been hit by a truck, but I also feel seen." Camille nodded. "You were never invisible, Brielle. They just didn't want to look." After a pause, Brielle asked, "Did we win?" Camille wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We made them see us. That's the first win. The rest we'll keep fighting for. Back on the streets, murals of Camille and Brielle began appearing. One showed Camille standing between a line of armored cops and a crowd of peaceful children. Another painted Brielle with angel wings, standing tall above a broken badge. The city had changed. It wasn't perfect, but it had started to listen. And as Camille looked out over the skyline from her small office in the city council building, she knew this fight wasn't over. But for the first time, she wasn't alone. And neither was her daughter. If this story moved you, if it made you feel seen or made you believe justice is still possible, then join us. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and help us keep these voices loud. Justice doesn't whisper, it roars.